Okay, so I wanted to talk about relating to others and relationships, interacting with and relating to other people after awakening. And this seemed to be one of the questions that, or one of the things that most people wanted to know about or ask about when I was talking to people online about this. And I think my experience with it has changed somewhat since I started journaling this. So what I've noticed is that you see through, or you don't believe in certain narratives anymore whatsoever. There's no belief that certain kind of causal relationships between people exist. And it doesn't work to, or it's not worked for me to try and pretend. Or people can tell that there's no strong belief investment in certain narratives anymore. there's no hiding it, really. So there are certain ways in which people interact or behave based on thought patterns which relate to other people that are clearly fictional, although they're very real to the person that's engaged in it. And people have a tendency to want to involve you in their narrative and their story, in their fiction, or a fiction that is very real to them. And when you aren't able to engage with that level of belief and level of emotional investment, some people feel like, or it seems like they feel like that you're not there with them. You're not. It comes across as kind of apathy. It comes across as disinterest. It can come across as not caring. And some people do have an aversion to that. And so, for example, just a basic example, if someone, I believed in this a lot before, that someone's actions, so I'll frame it from my point of view, if someone's actions don't meet my standard of acceptable from my biased point of view, therefore I believe that their actions are causing me to have this emotional reaction, an emotional reaction of dissatisfaction or unhappiness or annoyance or something like that. So from this old way of thinking and behaving and feeling, I'd be blaming someone else for my own emotional state. I'd be saying, you did this and you made me unhappy, or because of your actions I feel like this. And that's one of the things that with awakening is seen to be completely fictional, and it is seen to be the cause of a lot of our own personal suffering. And that's a very kind of basic common pattern of relation that pops up frequently in people's interactions and relationships with each other. So if I believed in that, then I would assume that I have made this person feel this certain way. I would have maybe a guilt. I would have a responsibility to make that person feel better. I would kind of own the deed in a sense. But the belief is not there anymore. There's no belief in it at all. So, for example, if someone says, you made me feel this way, and expects a remedy from you, and because you don't believe in that fiction, that you're not inclined to offer them a remedy that's satisfying from the point of view of that belief, if that makes sense. It can seem displeasing. It can seem very displeasing to the person, if that makes sense. I don't know if I've explained that very skillfully, but so there's that pattern of relation, and that kind of similar pattern plays out quite a lot in our relationships, and maybe we're not aware of it so much until we can see it. We can see it in real time. We can see it happening. But it can cause people to feel like, or it seems to cause people to feel like you're not with them. You're not. So people like to bring you into their story. People like you to identify with the story, take up a role within that story, and then play the story with them. And when you're less inclined just naturally to do that, it feels like you're not with them. You're not living the story with them. It feels maybe to them like you're distant. Maybe it feels like you're not there with them. And that can be very helpful for people at times. But if it's not the right time, it can seem unsettling. It can seem unhelpful. And it can seem like you're reflecting themselves back onto them, the person, and at times that's uncomfortable for them. Similarly, it seems like there's with a soul awakening process, there's a contentment, a general okayness, a peace, a satisfaction, a fullness that is just always there. And this pattern that I engaged in before all of this, and before the insights and so on, this pattern that I engaged in was trying to feel that peace, that okayness, trying to feel that happiness or steadiness for short-lived bursts of time, and it kind of came and went, and it was all based on the circumstances, and a lot of those circumstances were relationships, how I related to other people, what my idea of my self-image was, based on what I thought someone else, the way in which I thought someone else perceived. Just this constant effort, this constant draining game of this and that, ups and downs, mental projections, fabrications, memories, and so on. When that's not there, when the peace and the steadiness is just there by default all the time, it can seem like, maybe from another person's point of view, it can seem like you, again, the same thing, you're not engaging in this chase of the high and the low with them. You're not excited to the same extent when they find something exciting. You're not upset to the same extent when something upsetting happens. And again, it feels maybe to them like you're not with them. You're not sharing the experience to the same degree. At times, I'm not saying this is always how it is, of course, but in my experience with relationships and relating to other people, that there's some truth to this. But at the same time, when there's that steady level contentment and peace, that radiates out, and it seems to kind of stabilise the environment from a perspective anyway. From a perspective, it seems to stabilise the environment, to have a stabilising effect on the people in the environment, have a stabilising effect on our relationships, our interactions with other people. There isn't that volatility there that comes with the highs and the lows. There isn't the peaks and troughs. There isn't the extremes of emotion that are dependent on the environment themselves. And there's definitely a massive reduction in judgment and labelling and interpretation, interpreting something as bad or good. I like this, I don't like that. Because it's not needed. That projection isn't needed to stabilise the mood, to stabilise the emotional state. The emotional state's stable anyway. It's not dependent on what I think of this, what I think of that. Do I find this exciting, saddening, and so on. That projection and the repercussions, the emotional repercussions of that projection, just diminishes an enormous amount. So, real world example, the other week there, I was driving, and this has happened twice in the last month, I think. The other week there, I was driving, and someone was in the very right hand lane. So it was in a 3-lane kind of dual carriageway, 3-lane carriageway, and the person in this car just moved straight across the lanes and almost took me right off the road. So I had to react very quickly. So I braked and I swerved, levelled the car out, and then just kept going. And that was it. So this body mind perceived the danger, reacted. There was no thought in it. It was completely automatic. That happened, and then nothing disastrous came of it, thankfully. And then I was back on the road. And the contrast between that whole set of events, how I would have responded to and perceived that whole set of events previously, before awakening, with the story, with the judgment, with the blame, with the the whole fear narrative that had been constructed and was primed before that event, completely different, and there really was no problem in it at all. No problem. Just a happening. Maybe physically intense happening for this body mind, but out with that, nothing else needed, nothing added, just what happened. And these additions just complicate things and inevitably lead to personal suffering. And that's all because of the interpretation, the story of how I relate to this environment and what it means to me, the implications of that. When the stories fade away, when the thought narrative kind of diminishes, you can actually experience the sensory events, let's say. You can experience the physical reaction of the body. You can separate the physical reaction of the body to the thought narrative and the identity that was connected to that before. And the body reacts, and then it settles, and that's it. It's the mind that accumulates that stress, that heightened response from the nervous system. It's the mind that again holds on to that and then just perpetuates it through time. The same with our interactions with other people. So for example, someone who's behaving in a threatening way, the body reacts on its own, naturally. And the response to potential danger, it's a physical fear reaction, and then it's over as things change. It's the story that holds on to the fear, tries to go through potential, how can I stop this happening again? How can I not feel small? How can I not feel afraid? How can I feel safe and protected all the time? And that really is an impossible feat, an impossible task, because reality is changing constantly all the time. It's trying to predict the future and control for certain positive or negative perceptions, experiences, or perceived experiences through time. And that whole process takes so much energy, causes so much physical discomfort as well, I've noticed. And the most complex, and it's not needed, it really isn't needed. So that's an extreme example in the moment. The most complex and tricky version of that are these thought patterns, these thought forms, and about how we relate to other people, how someone else perceives me, how I perceive someone else, layering over this framework of I perceive this person a certain way, and I notice about them certain things that I don't like. I don't want to be perceived that way, so I'm going to adjust myself based on how I think someone in my position would perceive me from their point of view. It's just absolutely ridiculous, and I can see the use in it. I can see, we are social animals, and I understand why this is necessary to a certain extent, but there comes a point where we become aware of this and we look at it, and it's just a kind of maturity. These patterns that are noticed that are clearly dysfunctional and have proven to be dysfunctional over time can just be let go of. It's possible to do that, and the belief there can be shattered, and that whole pattern changes. It takes some time, but the whole pattern changes. And that there are certain stories that we tell ourselves that are entirely fictional and are just not needed at all. And we can just let go of them and just go with the flow. It turns out that all this planning, all this preempting, pretty much all of it, well, I'm not going to say all of it, most of it, like 90-something% of it, if I was to put an arbitrary figure on it, is ineffective. It doesn't work, it's not needed, and it causes more problems for ourselves. So it's entirely possible just to recognise that and let it go. And like I was saying, most of these patterns are to do with relating to other people, relationships with other people. And I can tell you that when these thought patterns and stories and illusions aren't there anymore, life goes on, continue to relate to other people just fine. Like I explained at the beginning, there are some differences in how people respond to interacting with you. But overall, the difference is overwhelmingly positive. Overwhelmingly positive. And it's like, you can now remember, and I can, so when the story's not going on, the story distances us from reality, it distances us from the feeling, kind of separates, muffles or wraps the feeling in cotton wool. But there's a feeling there, and an energetic feeling, not to sound too weird, but I can when I pass someone in the street, I can feel the narrative, not the narrative for the specifics of that, but I can feel the accumulation of energy that has been cultivated by this thought narrative over time. I can feel it in another person, and it's got there are certain kind of thought emotion forms that have a flavour to it, and the body responds to it. The body can feel it. The body can feel it, and lost my train of thought. Yeah. The body responds. It's like a radiating of energy out from the person. And I'm sure everyone that's watching this knows exactly what I'm talking about. A vibe, an energy, atmosphere. And we all know people that, walk into the room and radiate this atmosphere, and some are more pleasant than others. And you feel it, and intuitively there's that feeling, and okay, I have to protect myself in a certain way from whatever this is that's going on with this person, whatever weird shit's going on with this energy here. But so when that energy, when you've deconstructed all these pathologies, all these dysfunctional accumulations of fictional thought narratives attached to emotion, when that's cleared out, then people want to be around you more. People sense that off you. They sense something off you, and they gravitate towards you. They want to be around you more. I find that people will open up to me about all sorts of stuff that wouldn't really be normally considered appropriate to to talk about in casual conversation. It appears like there's a kind of mirror there. There's a mirror effect there. People feel comfortable. People tend to feel comfortable. People let their guard down. People aren't as defensive. I think maybe we can sense authenticity in someone else, and when that's there, we feel comfortable. We feel at ease, and maybe there's a transmission there of that peace that I talked about. That is just the nature of everything anyway. So it seems that when the personal narrative isn't there, what we are seems to just not be clouded by all of this other stuff, all of these barriers and defences. And when we're fully transparent, fully authentic, that true nature comes up and it can kind of shine through, and people notice themselves in it at a deep intuitive level. People recognise something intuitively about their self, their nature. It seems to be that way anyway. I could be wrong. There's also a fascination with everything that obviously extends to people. Like when I'm talking to someone, there's like like I said, when people try and bring you into a narrative, what I can appreciate about the person is their essence, their existence, their being. They're just as mysterious and fascinating as everything that I, in this body mind, interact with in the relative world on a day-to-day basis. And all I see is that radiating through. All I perceive is sharing that. And the story, the talk, the language, the specifics are just a kind of peripheral thing that is there on the surface. But there's something much deeper, much more profound. The texture of the sound and the language and the words. The texture of the fabric of what that person seems to be made of. Pure consciousness, not separable from the pure consciousness that is everywhere and everything, that is immediately surrounding that seeming individual form. And it's hard to be caught up in the superficial story when you look into someone's eyes and all you can see is an infinite void. A fascinating, mysterious, profound, infinite void of who knows what. That overshadows everything. It's why the story isn't, at least at this point in time, as this integrates, the story's not as interesting anymore. And people do notice that there's a change there. people do pick up that there's something different about you, especially when you're in an intimate relationship. I won't go too in depth into it. I'm married, and I've had many conversations with my wife about about this, and through a period of selfishly wanting to have her understand this, and kind of imposing my view onto her, and she's basically said intellectually I understand all this, but at this point in time, not interested in this. At this point in time, I don't want to pursue this. I would just be happier living in the relative reality. So, huge level of self-awareness there. But in my relationship, I've had to say, look, I don't believe in certain things anymore. And I've tried. I can't function with the same level of investment. I wouldn't be authentic if I pretended that I believed, and you can't really pretend anyway, that I pretended like I believed in this, whatever this thing might be. And there have been plenty of instances where, like I said, the person feels like, or your partner feels like you're not with them, and it has created problems. But I've had to just be authentic, be honest, and say, like, this is how I perceive things, and probably not going to be as emotionally invested in certain things. But it does take a bit of adjustment in relationships, for sure. Kind of makes you realise that what empathy isn't what it's maybe conventionally understood as. It's more of a physical, energetic thing. It's not cognitively understanding a story. Like, for example, in my relationship, I feel what my wife feels. There's a physical, energetic, like, empathy there, a link there. But I don't believe in the story of why, most of the time, why that emotion has come about. The way I experience it is there's emotion there, or there's this emotion there, or there's not. There's just different emotions happening. And as this integrates, at least like more recently in this phase, it's been so that the story that is happening around that, I can't see. I can understand it, and I remember thinking this way before, but it doesn't appear to me that that's a real thing. It doesn't appear to me that there's a causal relationship between these circumstances and this emotion. And you really can't pretend like you believe in it. It becomes more and more difficult to be inauthentic. It becomes more difficult to pretend. There's just openness, authenticity, honesty, and there's no need or no reason to fabricate false stories. I remember I used to fabricate things just to relate to people. Like a kind of, what did they call it? Social chameleon. I'm not sure if the chameleon is the right one. The lizard that changes colours to fit in with its environment. Yeah, like a social lizard. There's none of that anymore. It's just authenticity with yourself and other people. And it can be uncomfortable at times. But that discomfort is, at least from my point of view now, is physical sensation that just comes and goes. That's it. It's very simple. So if someone has an emotional reaction to you as an authentic person, you'll feel that, but you might not believe that you are the cause of that. You may not believe that there's you in the first place, if that makes sense. And it becomes more so that just someone's company has more value than telling each other stories about stuff that's not just this in the moment. There's different kind of social value that's profound, that isn't dependent on the intellectual intricacies of relationship. As in, people can be appreciated just as they are, for what they are, and for what you as a seeming separate person share with them, and that's enough before anything else comes on top of it. And there's just an acceptance of everything about other people, even the dysfunctions that would have triggered your story beforehand. There's just an acceptance there, and it's alright. Anyway, that's a very long video. That'll do for now.